Dzień dobry Państwu. Dzisiaj będzie troszkę po angielsku, ponieważ tematyka dotycząca Egiptu, a zwłaszcza początków okresu dynastycznego interesuje bardzo wielu ludzi. Może ktoś zaglądnie do tych materiałów. And because of this, today will be in English, because many people is interested in problems concerning transition between Neolithic and Dynastic. And because of many years of investigation in Egypt, I collected all data, and on the basis of this I tried to explain some phenomena present on this border between Neolithic and early Dynastic, because there are some documents, there are some confirmations suggesting that were interesting at this time, were interesting phenomena, climatic, and they are present. There are still exist in geological profiles of sediments in Nile Valley and region of Fayum, etc. So we will start from Hierakonpolis in Upper Egypt. This was mission, American Polish mission. So Polish, I was one Polish, but let's say it was Polish mission in part, and investigation were conducted by scientists from Penn State University in United States. And my investigation was devoted for the determination of geology of site, archaeological site localized in Hierakonpolis. And what we have at this area, maybe we will back to the place, to the map. This is Idfu and Luxor, and at this area we work. This is Great Wadi, it is this one, and site is localized at this place, more or less. This what was tested by me and American colleagues. And what is interesting, in front of this wadi there is a floodplain and archaeological site. We have sequence of various occupations, starting from Nagada up to Middle Kingdom, with small breaks between. And first of all, this locality of these all sites in front, in outflow of Wadi, documents that at this time Wadi did not conduct water. It was dry Wadi, and Wadis are dry if there are no rains. So evidently this locality confirms very dry period between Neolithic and early Dynastic. So we did a lot of boreholes. There are my workers, very nice people. They joke all time, and there is place of excavation. As you see, most of local peoples are looking for various things and not work too much. But there is a corner of the small trench, plenty of pottery. And this is map, not mine, but taken from the paper, from the publication, where we have traces of architecture, structures, and New Kingdom, some architecture, some objects, a type of temple. And we work at this area, and there are localities of our small trenches which were examined. What is interesting, that of course all area is area of agriculture, and water is transported using canals. Artificial pumps work all time, and irrigation goes. And because of this situation, there is an evaporation on the surface of the soil. Plenty of salt is crystallizing on the surface, and this salinity of the soils is very dangerous, because if salt will be a lot of salt, nothing will grow. This will be end of the agriculture. Before construction of the dam in the Aswan, natural high water flows of Nile removed these salts crystallizing on the surface of the soil, and now this dam in Aswan is regulating level of the water, and because of this salt crystallizing due to evaporation of water used for irrigation is not removed, and at some places the surface of the soil is white, and practically nothing is growing. This is additional information not connected with the transition of Neolithic to Dynastic, but important for the agriculture and all Egypt, because similar phenomena are observed at other places of Nile Valley, and as we know, Nile Valley and Delta and slightly region of Fayum, there are producers of the food. So if soil will be salty, there will be reduction of amount of the products, agriculture products. So now we know that Hierakonpolis in the transition, during the transition between Neolithic and Dynastic, was very dry, and at this time structures were connected with the occupation were built, were constructed in the outflow of Big Wadi. So it was very dry. I suppose between 3,300 and 3,005, maybe 600 BC. What we have, the situation near the Armand. There was the Polish-German expedition working on this period between Neolithic and Proto-Dynastic. It was conducted by Polish professor, Professor Kozłowski and Professor Ginter, and we did examination. I did examination of geology at this area, especially geology of Valley of the Nile, and because it was this reconstruction, it was very important for understanding of various climatic phenomena. And what we have there our site, archaeological site, localized on the small elevation just above the floodplain of the Nile, and behind, to the west, we have small hills and so-called jebel, bigger hills elevated up to 500 meters. So we have various environments of the sedimentation. It's important. So first of all, Nile is valley, central part of valley of the Nile, this lowest, most lower place. In the region of Armand, it's about 96, 98 meters above sea level. And of course, there are mostly Nile sediments transported from Upper Egypt and from Sudan, as well as transported by rivers coming from East and West Desert. So at various places, sediments of Nile are differentiated. because if material was transported from east, this means from East Desert, sediments contain heavy minerals, connected with magmatic rocks, metamorphic rocks, etc., because this type of rocks are present on at the East Desert. And when we are near of the rivers coming to the Nile from the west, we have material transported from the West Desert. So there are Cretaceous sandstones, neogenic limestones, etc. So we have other admixtures in the Nile of the sediments, of the sediments of the Nile. So from place to place, the mineral composition of Nile sediments is differentiated, is various, because of material transported from various directions, as well as because of transportation of material from the Sudan. And because of this, it's important, because of this, at some places the same silts are red, at other places the same silts, this means silts of the same age, are gray, and many geologists selected these various type of sediments, and this is still one sediment, Nile sediment of the same age, but because of various composition of transportation of material from various sites, this means from east or from west, its various composition. The main components there are kaolinitic minerals type of kaolinite, mostly redeposited terra rossa, because in the past, when the desert was green and was wet, limestones surrounding Nile Valley were covered with red soils called terra rossa, and now only at some places we have traces of terra rossa. At some places, probably the thickness of this terra rossa in the past was many meters. So if terra rossa was transported to the Nile, we have Nile sediments red, but if red because of admixture of red soils, and if material was transported from the east, the silts of the same age are gray. For example, Sahaba formation at some places is dark, at some places is gray, at some places is red, but this is the same layer. And of course, due to floods and rains in the south, the level of the Nile oscillated up and down, up and down. So the range, the border of sediments of the Nile, at some moments where this border was there, at some moments were there, and at some moments where Nile was very high was there. On the other side, we have other environment of sedimentation, because this was silent sedimentation, slow water flowing slow, etc., etc. And the relation between level of the Nile is connected with the rains in the south. Torrential rains, water clouds were transported from Indian Ocean from time to time, one a year. And at this moment, the level of the Nile was elevated. So high level of the Nile don't means local rains, but means rains in the south, in Sudan. But sometime in the past, of course, if there was the rain, material was redeposited from surrounding area and transported to the Nile. But what the situation we have in the Jebel, between these highest points in the Jebel and let's say lower points, we have typical mountain landscape. So rivers coming up during the rains, rivers coming up from the Jebel down show typical mountain character. So because of very steep these slopes, water flow very fast, and were able to transport big blocks, like in Tatra Mountains, for example, in Poland. But later, then, when the area was more flat, there was the change of the speed from very fast of water of rivers to this slower water flowing down up to the Nile. And because of the change of this velocity of flowing of the water, these great big blocks transported very fast from slopes from Jebel, they start to be deposited because the speed of the water due to flat area, the speed of the water was very reduced, and the force of transportation of the water was very reduced. So at this place we have concentrations of the material redeposited from the highest part of the Jebel. The most interesting is this area, because this is area of the intercalation of Nile sediments and sediments redeposited from the hills. When the Nile was high because of rains in Sudan, the water where the limit of the water was growing, and the Nile sediments were deposited up to there. And where local rains were heavy, and from Jebel flow the rivers and streams, to this part of sediments was added material from the Jebel. So small or greater gravels, sands, composed of small grains of limestones. So we have type of cake composed of Nile sediments and Jebel sediments, Nile sediments and Jebel sediments. And due to this situation, and if it's chance for datation, we may recognize high levels of the Nile and intensity of local rains. It's very important during the reconstruction of the phenomenon at this area, and from the size of the stones, of these fragments of limestones, we are able more or less precisely say about the speed of the water, and we may say something about the intensity of rains, because if gravels are thick, big grains, this water flow fast, this means we have heavy rains. And if we have delicate sand composed of fragments of limestones transported from Jebels, was rain, but not very strong. And in one geological profile of small wadi, because there is the wadi coming up to the limit of cultivation and next to the Nile, there is our archaeological site, investigated by my friends and by me too, in part. I did examination of sediments of deposits of this small, now dry river, dry valley. But in the past, this valley, this small river, coming to the Nile, transported water. And there are profiles from various places of sediments deposits of this dry river terraces. And as you see, sand and gravels and sand, so. And was measured the diameter of these stones, and because of the of these, it was possible to say something about speed of transportation of the water. If were transported big stones like this, water flow fast. If was sand deposited like this, the water flow slowly. So this is a document of speed of water of high speed. This means heavy rains, and this is a document of small rains, not very fast water. And according to this, if there is chance for the datation of this sediment, piece of wood, of pottery, or something like this, or skeletons of mollusca, various things useful for datation, we may reconstruct not only the speed of water, but we may transfer the speed of the water, reconstruction of the speed of the water, to reconstruction of humidity and to local climatic phenomena. And what is interesting, that from this all data and other, no time for details, we may say that peoples at this moment, site is pre and proto-dynastic, they came because it was drier and drier at this area. I don't say about Sahara because it's too far, but at this area they came to the water, detailedly, precisely at the time between Neolithic and Dynastic, pre and proto-dynastic site. So there are evidences confirming that between 300, 3,200, 3,400 and 3,600 maybe BC, it was strong reduction of the rains and was very strong change to the direction of dry climate. So because of this, these people came to the Nile Valley. And area of Castel Saga, there was Polish-German mission conducted by my friends and some colleagues from German Archäologische Institut Ableitung Cairo. And this is this area. Castel Saga is localized more or less at this place. And what is interesting at this area, this is relic of the lake, now about 78 meters below sea level in depression. This is green area with agriculture, Nile Valley, and old canal, Yusuf Canal, because in dynastic time, during dynastic time, water of the Nile was transported by this canal to the Fayum Lake for elevation of the water, for elevation of the lake. So at this time, lake was great and agriculture was big, developed. Now situation is as is, but because of this, that there are no outflow from this area to the Nile, because this area is lower than the Nile Valley and lake is much lower, because at this moment there is about 50-60 meters above sea level, and this is about 78 meters below sea level. So difference in the highest is much more than 150 meters between Nile Valley and surface of the lake. But knowing this, that lake was without outflow, we may observe the changes of the lake according to rains. Mostly at this western part in Sahara. There are small streams and river coming, now dry of course, but in the past transported water. And according to rains, the size of the lake was changed, where at this time when were heavy rains, water was transported, the lake, let's say, grow. The banks were changed, and when was dry, no rains, was no rains, the level was reduced of the water, and the lake started to be smaller. And according to this oscillation of the lake, this means according to the rains, we have various locality of archaeological sites, because people like sit on the shore of the lake, they use water, they fishing, they hunting, etc. They need water for agriculture and drinking water. So we observe phenomenon of the oscillation of the sites, archaeological sites, according to the changes of the size of the lake, migration this and this direction, this and this direction. And because of this situation, we may first of all discover concrete archaeological sites. If it was dry, the sites are near of the lake, present lake. If it was wet and were heavy rains, lake grow, size of the lake grow, and people sit there, and there. This means now in the desert, but in the past, of course, it was shore of this oscillating lake. And this is area near of Castle Saga, and we have Jebel and small valleys with relics of streams and rivers coming down from the Jebel to this lake, localized very near in morphology. And these light sediments, there are sediments of the lake, so-called marls, Cretaceous marls, containing many skeletons of various molluscs and other. And of course, this is documented as at time of deposition of these light sediments. Lake was much bigger. Of course, these dunes are secondary, transported by winds, aeolian. And now there is small example of the relics of geology, and there are older sediments showing that the lake's shore was very near, and next sediments with this structure showing that the shore of the lake bank of the lake was very, very far. So according to this phenomenon, even during the pharaonic time, during Middle Kingdom, there is temple of Middle Kingdom age, and there are settlements of Middle Kingdom investigated by Professor Joachim Schliwa from Krakow University. We have a situation that in front of wadis, during time of transition, Neolithic, early dynastic, there are some occupations. So there is again confirmation that this is this temple marked. During transition Neolithic, early dynastic, and proto-time, dynastic time, there were some localities, some archaeological sites documenting that there was no rain and water was not transported by this small wadi. Time is similar, 3,300 up to 3,600, 700. It's not, there are not precisely done datation, but generally it was not one moment, it was time of changes, and there was many phases, many stages and oscillations, more wet, more dry, more wet, dry, with general strong tendency to dry. It was very dry time, this period between 3,300 and 3,600 generally. And there are archaeological sites investigated by our team with datations, and one can observe the oscillation of the border of the bank, of the shore of the lake, and sediments. One time there and one time there, so bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller. And because of these oscillations of the lake, and because of this, the lake had no outflow, we may say about local rains, because these changes of the size of the lake was the result of local rains. So on the base of observation of sediments, lake sediments and surrounding area surrounding lake, we may say about changes of the climate. And this, what I say, is confirmed by many sites. There is only a few examples. Next site, archaeological site investigated in geological part by me. I did not only geology, but in part pottery and stone objects and other. This is Polish Egyptian mission, Tel El Farha, Nile Delta. This is a site where we observe transition between Neolithic, late Neolithic, and pre-Proto-Dynastic. The same period we may observe like in sites I described, I said before. Conditions are other because its delta is much more to the north. There is the area of Mediterranean Sea, so climatic conditions are completely other. But some phenomena are very exciting and connected with various climatic observations. So, our site is somewhere under the rainbow there. There is Cairo, canal, Suez Canal, and so we do their boreholes. It's 20 years of investigation at this area. And what is interesting, because archaeological site examined by us is localized on the top of small Gezira. This means maybe even not small. On Gezira, this is sandy hill, big one, and it was empty, without occupation. So I talk about this late Pleistocene and transition to the Holocene. This surface was empty, and at this time, when was last glaciation, at the end of last glaciation, the level of Mediterranean Sea was about 100 meters below present level. So the outflow of Nile, starting from Cairo up to the shore of Mediterranean Sea, was very steep. It was about 100 meters on the distance, let's say about 300 kilometers. the same situation we have between Cairo, more or less, and Edfu, Aswan, where is difference in the location about sea level about 100 meters between Aswan and Cairo, on the distance about 800 kilometers. And the same situation we have reduction of the elevation between Cairo and Mediterranean Sea, we have on the distance about 300. So the speed of the Nile, of the flow of the water between Cairo and Mediterranean Sea at the end of glaciation, last glaciation, this means about 18,000 years ago, was big, and the river flow very fast, not as now slow delta. And because of the dissolution of the ice sheets, the level of sea in the old world was elevated. The same was situation in the Mediterranean Sea, and because of this, these hills, sandy hills present in delta, so-called Gezira, were slowly covered with Nile sediments, because sea level, Mediterranean sea level, was elevated, and the speed of the water of the Nile was slowly reduced, and because of this very soft, very delicate material was deposited, because if Nile flow very fast, there was no chance for deposition. All was transported to the Mediterranean Sea. When speed of the water of the Nile was reduced because of the elevation of the Mediterranean Sea, and because of the melting of the ice sheets, the speed of the water was reduced and start to be deposited silts of delta. We have various stages. Stage 2, at the base of this small hill, Gezira, start appear Nile sediments, because this is sand and this is silt, completely various sediments. Next, it was this thickness of these sediments, Nile sediments, grow and grow and grow and grow, and speed of the Nile River was reduced, and during this time were constructed delta. Before, delta maybe was, but completely other than now. And during the time of Nagada, came first peoples to this Gezira and start to sit on the top of Gezira, on the slope. There was the small branch of the Nile in delta, and they had water, and they sit there. I show you the photos of this relics of this occupation. And next, we have situation that Nile was big and Nile was small, high and low, due to rains and situation in Sudan. There was elevation of the water in the Nile, and we have floods. And it's especially interesting this place because there are archaeological layers, there are Nile sediments, and this place is exciting, very interesting for geologists, not only because if level of Nile was high, silts of Nile were deposited on the this hill, on this Gezira. When elevation of the Nile water was reduced, sediments redeposited from the slope of Gezira were transported and covered the sediments of the of Nile. So we have type of mixed sedimentation, Nile sedimentation and slope sedimentation, Nile sedimentation and slope sedimentation. It was repeated many times, because from geology we know that were periods, were phases when geziras, all in, or maybe not all, but big part of geziras in delta was, they were islands, where when the Nile was very high, it was these small hills, this gezira, were surrounded by water. It was possible to go from one to other place with boats only. Because as you know, and all knows, now elevation of delta is 3 to 5 meters above sea level. Mediterranean Sea, it's practically very similar elevation like sea. So if the Nile was high because of the rains, we have silts between archaeological layers. Silts of Nile between archaeological layers. It's relatively easy determined, because silts are great without archaeological artifacts, etc. And archaeological layers are sandy, because this is this material from hill, from the gezira, with fragments of pottery, burnt soil, and various artifacts or so. And we have type of sedimentation. One time high Nile, one time sedimentation from the slope. And according to this situation, if we do datation of these phases of high Nile and low Nile, we may determine climatic phenomenon in delta. When was what? When were rains? When was dry? Etc. etc. In comparison with the south, so-called Upper Egypt situation is other, because their climatic changes are more soft, because the area of Mediterranean Sea is area of nice climate, wet climate, and in the south, in the Upper Egypt, the climate was very dry. So phenomena, there are similar phenomena, but the intensity of phenomena and time of phenomena is slightly other. It started, this dry period started between 3,300, 3,600, 700, started in this Upper Egypt much earlier, and is well seen, and in the delta it's happened later, and it's not as well seen, because phenomena are more soft because of local conditions. And there are first occupations of the Nagada on the slope of this gezira. Many structures are geological. It's not my business, and I was taught by my friends, especially by Professor Krzysztof Ciałowicz, who is chief of expedition, and Marek Chłodnicki, and we have many guests, many discussions. So after 20 years of investigation, we have something, we have small knowledge about it, what was it, so. There is one of first occupation of empty gezira, so it's document of the coming of peoples to the delta because of the climatic changes. They start to sit on the gezira, on this sandy hill, and before this hill was empty. They came because of something. They came because of the change of the climate. They sit there. And this was more or less at the same time as I said, 3,300 and 3,700 BC, more or less. And this is drawing of the situation of Nile sediments and archaeological layers, and one time Nile higher clays in archaeological layers, one time when the level of water in delta was lower, deposition by gravity, deposition, transportation of material on surface of Nile silts. Part of this phenomenon is described in this publication. If one like to see, welcome. Thank you for listening. And in opinion, after near 40 years of examination in Egypt, I may say it's very probable that the reason of transition between Neolithic and Dynastic was connected with changes of the climate and very, very dry phase between these two times, Neolithic and early Dynastic. There was no flows of the fluids of the Nile. This time were constructed architectural objects in the very low in morphology in valley of the Nile. All these phenomena confirm very hot and very dry phase, very low level of the Nile, and reduction of the water at surrounding area, and it was necessary to migrate to the water. Only one the river of the river in west, in east and north Egypt, flowing continuously. It's Nile, so people migrate from East Desert, West Desert, and from Near East, from various places to the valley of the Nile. And there are results. This is what I say very fast and very easy. It's the results of many years of examination of many sites. And these heavy, difficult conditions, climatic and water conditions, were the reasons of change of the activity of peoples, because it was necessary to build canals for irrigation and organize life other ways than in Nagada, and they start to do this, and next, because of these changes of climate, start to be formed, this dynastic, fantastic dynastic phase, stage of culture in Egypt. So thank you very much. It was slightly long, but problem is big, so it's not easy to say this during 5 minutes. Thank you very much, and welcome for next lecture. See you.